Welcome to today's video. In this video I will reveal what type of mountains are in GTA 5. You might wonder, what do I mean with this? So basically, mountains can be formed in different ways. It is formed in a certain way, it will be a blah blah mountain, and if it's formed in a different way, it will be a blah blah mountain. Well, I say blah blah, but the actual name for these, there is 5 different types of mountain. First of all, there are volcanic mountains. Even if you don't have a geology degree, this one is pretty easy to understand and identify. As you can see, it's a sharp cone shape with a crater. It's basically a volcano. These types of mountains are primarily present at the edges of the tectonic plates where, well, magma pushes up and, well, erupts. Secondly, we have fault mountains. These mountains form when 2 tectonic plates crash into each other. This causes these mountains to have very distinct features, something which I will dive deeper into later in the video. Thirdly, we have fault block mountains. These form at places where tectonic plates slide past each other or away from each other, also resulting in relatively distinct features, although some features can be confusing when comparing it to primarily fault mountains, something which I will highlight more in the video later on as well. Fourthly, we have plateau mountains. These are formed by a slow collision between tectonic plates, where one plate dives under the other. Or volcanic plateaus, where continuous volcanic eruptions deposit volcanic material which form a plateau eventually. Plateaus are recognizable by the flat appearance and sharp cliffs at the edges. Lastly, we have dome mountains. These form due to magma pushing the crust up, much like a pimple. I will talk more about how to recognize this type of mountain later in the video. The first mountain we're going to be talking about is Mount Yoshua, located between Mount Chiliad and Fort Zancudo. It is one of the easiest mountains. As you can see, it's very clearly a fault mountain. It has these very clear fault lines. It was a bit hard for especially the other mountains to, give the clear distinction because, well, mountains in GTA 5 are a lot smaller than, well, a real life mountain. Also, these don't really appear in mountain ranges as much. In real life, a mountain not often appears so low. Well, depends on the mountain. But yeah, essentially it's a bit hard because you don't have the full range. This, however, was pretty clearly a fault mountain, especially because of those very distinct faults, which are very wavy and like very distinct, easy to recognize faults. Next up we have Mount Gordo, which at some point looking at it, I thought, oh, this is a fault mountain, as you can see in a second, because it has some things that look a lot like faults. However, these are not necessarily fault. As I spoiled before in the intro, fault block mountains actually have something like it as well. As they're being lifted up, they actually have these kind of distinctions as well. The reason why I chose to classify this as a fault block mountain is because it has a very steep side on the other side and a little bit less steep side on the other side, which means it falls more into a fault block. Also because it doesn't really have those super distinctive fault features. However, this one can be a bit tricky to classify. However, I chose in the end for fault block mountains. Right next to Mount Gordo we have the Giansky mountain range, which spans all the way from here to, well beyond the quarry, and almost to, like, I think Human Lab. No, Human Lab is here, the quarry is actually behind it. I classify these as fault block mountains. Initially I wanted to say fault mountain because it's a range as well. However, if you look at the shape, they're not very folded. You have like very distinct peaks. You also have some of the distinctions of a fault block with like very sharp, steep faces on this side and the other side being a lot less steep, which in the end I decided to go fault block. However, I can see that it might be fault. However, I didn't see very distinctive fault ones, and especially on this mountain you can see like a very non-steep side on one side and a little bit steeper side on the other side, which in the end made me conclude that it is a fault block. Next up we have the Tativia Mountains. These are better known as, well, the mountains around the Land Act Reservoir Dam. In this scenario, I've classified this as a dome mountain, mainly because of its isolated nature. It's just like one kind of mountain shape. And, in the sides it goes down, it has a side, and then inside there's a lake. which makes it a bit difficult. But the lake doesn't go down that far, so I don't think the separate mountains could be separate mountains and just be adapted towards like a GTA size, because the mountains in GTA are very much smaller than a real life mountain. However, in this state, I would classify it as a dome mountain mainly because of that isolated nature of it just being popped. It's just elevated, around the surrounding area. So yeah, that's in the end why I go for dome. I wouldn't go volcanic because especially there's no volcanic, mountains right around LA, and this one is really close. Next up, we have the Palomino Highlands. They're not even called mountains, and as you can see, they're very mild. I actually had some conversation with ChatGPT, but ChatGPT sucks at geology, to be honest. Like, he just gives contradicting things the whole time. He said it's a plateau, but I don't really see it as plateau. Plateaus have very, sharp edges, like little cliffs, and this definitely doesn't really have that. I, in the end, went for full block because on this side it's very, very not steep. On the other side, it's a bit steeper, and I think that's quite full blocky. So in the end, I've gone full block mainly because of that distinction of it just being steep on the one side. You can see it very clearly here. It's steep on the left side, right side, it's not so steep. Next up, we have Mount Han and Galileo Mountain, Mount Galileo. So Mount Han, better known as the mountain with the Vinewood sign, and Galileo with the observatory. I think both of these are dome mountains, if you don't assume they're being part of the same range. But if you look at the features, they're like very similar on each side. They're like kind of steep, but not super steep, and they kind of pop out of the landscape. Also, the tops are not very jagged or like very peaky. They're very rounded, which is very common for a dome mountain as well. Also a feature you can see around the dam. Next up, we have Tongva Hills and Bangham Hills. I guess I couldn't really find a name. There's Bangham Canyon right there, so I assume it's Bangham Mountain or something like that. They're both relatively similar. I went for dome once again because if you look at especially the peaks, they're very, rounded, just like Mount Galileo and Mount Han. And I think this is the closest we can get. I don't think there's not really any faults present. If it's part of a larger mountain range, maybe, but like the peaks are not jagged enough. Also, I think for a full block, it also doesn't have a very dominant steep side. So I think Dome Mountain is probably the most realistic answer. If you see, I think it's two separate dome mountains, and then, all the relief we see and stuff, it's mostly just erosion. And that's why I think, dome is probably the most accurate thing right here. So next up we have, of course, the mountain you've all been waiting for. It's Mount Chiliad. And Mount Chiliad is actually a fault block mountain. It's a bit hard to see maybe from here, but it has some distinct features that makes it a fault block mountain. So as you can see, this side is not super steep. I mean, most of you probably have driven up the right side on screen right now, and it's relatively doable. However, if you go a little bit more here, now on the left side of your screen, there is a very steep, edge. It's really hard to drive up on that side. And I think it's because of the fault block feature, where one side is very steep and the other side is a lot more accessible. It also has these things, which I, in my initial research, I was like, ooh, are these faults? But I don't think it's a fault. It's very much also in the middle of nowhere, kind of. Like, it just pops up on its own. It's huge. And it doesn't have any other mountains surrounding it. And it doesn't have those very distinct fault lines as in Mount Joshua. And that's why I think in the end, Mount Chiliad is a fault block mountain. It's also the highest mountain. And this also shows the scale of GTA. This thing is only like 890 meters tall or something. But it's supposed to represent a 2,200 meter tall mountain. And in real life, this would take up way much space. As you can see, it's not that much space. But yeah, this was my video. As you can see here, like a little overview of all the mountains I covered. If you have any comments, if you're like a trained geologist, please feel free to correct me. My geography degree, which is not a geology degree, is some time ago already. And Yeah, I've done some research. I tried to make it as accurate as I could. But if you have any discussion points, please let me know, and don't be afraid to comment.